no dispersion waiting because you have suffered some loss, some grief. I mean, there's been a suffering.
What we're doing, even when we're doing acupuncture, we're releasing the anxiety and the stress so that you can start processing the trauma in a very stable state.
It's lunacy. Lunacy and logic
with Lilith and Dr. Charlier.
And welcome back, Cosmic Family, to Lunacy and
Logic!
Yeah! So I'm really excited for this episode. Welcome back, Lilith.
Thank you, Dr. Charlier.
So we're going to be starting off with a pulse, checking in on how things are going.
Dr. Charlier, what is your pulse of the moment? Because shit has been intense.
Shit has been intense, yes. The pulse has been for me this kind of full moon in Scorpio last time we talked. And basically, my father actually transitioned to the other side. So we can definitely have a deeper conversation about that. Just because, right now is a really important time for people who are transitioning. And my father transitioned, and we'll go deeper into this conversation. So I'm excited to kind of share with you all kind of, my pulse. How about you?
Well, I have got a song that I want to sing for you that demonstrates my pulse.
Okay.
So this is a song just to give you an idea as to the pulse of the moment. Take a step into the havoc, look around us and even the half of it. Walking the line between panic and losing my mind, embracing the madness. My devils, they whisper in my ear, deafening me with all my fears. I'm living in a nightmare. La da da dee da, la da da dee da, la da da dee da da. Cross my heart and hope to die. Welcome to my dark side. That's been my pulse. The devil whispering in my ears, deafening me with my fears.
So we're definitely going a little darker today, everybody. That's the pulse.
And that's the pulse. The bottom line is, what's been happening with me is, bro, I don't even know if I believe anymore. As these lower chakras are clearing that are weighing down the Kundalini, the 6 and 7 chakras, you're really dealing with severe trust issues with God and trust issues in life. And these are survival fears. These are, ancestral karma that you're dealing with. So it's been pretty intense. How did my trust issue surface? So I look back on my family, and the experience with my family in the past has been, everybody that has given everything has died after having lost it all. Okay? So in my family has not witnessed justice in terms of giving. That, the whole concept, I've heard a lot of things on YouTube lately where they're like, oh, it's been proven, like, if you give to charity, it actually comes back like 1.5, 1.6 times, like this is what they've observed or whatever. No, my family has not seen that. Okay? My grandfather used to be one of the richest men in the country. He got defrauded by his closest allies who stole everything from him, to cut a long story short. And to this day, they've gotten away with it. My grandfather died heartbroken and essentially broke. And those people are still getting away with it. Then you go into the thing about, losing my brother at such a young age. When your whole world has been ripped apart before, and I'm certainly very aware that God can easily do that again. And if you take all these like things into account that I've experienced, I mean, I've just mentioned two significant ones now, but they have caused me to have trust issues in God and be like, okay, you want me to trust blindly and have this faith and go forth with love and light? But really, how the fuck am I supposed to do that when you have not shown me love and light in the past?
Yeah.
So that's pretty much what I feel like. Have you been dealing with trust issues?
not necessarily trust issues. I think just deeper challenges to kind of make me connect more deeply to like this divine spark, right? Like, how are we all related? Because when my father passed away now, it kind of changed the dynamics of our family, right? Because I am the only male in my family, and so when my father passing means I'm now the new patriarch of the family. So it is kind of this deeper transitioning of, like you said, our ancestors passing and passing on the inheritance to us, not just material inheritance, but like responsibility and accountability. And that, I'm feeling a lot more responsibility to show up as the living embodiment of my ancestors, which is my father, right? So to me, that's been a much deeper kind of stepping up to what God wants me to step up to. And it's not that it's not trust, it's just kind of understanding the bigger plan without judgment. Because it's easy to be upset when someone passes, but for me, it's like if I kind of like reserve that judgment and kind of go, no, what is happening? I'm able to kind of see the bigger picture. But yes, I mean, when in the moment of the loss, it was really difficult. And there was some emotional parts. I was like, why did this happen now? Why did this happen later? Are there going to be more issues? Because we all know every time someone passes away, this is the eighth house for me. So I'm experiencing a lot of eighth house transit. And so with the death of a family, now you have actually, like the eighth house says, you now are taking over financial responsibility or emotional responsibility, right? And so for me, I'm not losing trust. I'm just being guided to step up more, and that obviously could feel like like if anything, like, does God trust me to pull off what I believe I believe this process is? And I've learned that as much as I thought I knew what this process is, I don't. This is like fresh, right? This has only been a month. And so I'm experiencing my family reacting to me differently. So I feel like almost like God's like, here, you have the responsibilities to do this now. You can do it. And I'm like, I was happy not taking on those responsibilities. So it does feel like there's an upgrade, and I'm choosing to step in, even though I wasn't really ready for it. We did not see it coming. My dad was fine until the day where he's like, okay, I'm ready to go. And within 24, 48 hours, he was gone. And we didn't see the progression of it. So that was a little tough, but he's much older. And so in a way, like at first we were like shocked. And then after a few days, my trust in the divine plan was becoming clearer. But at first, I did not expect it. So that's kind of where I'm at with that.
That's intense. I would say my pulse is thin and slippery. Thin for my deficiency in trust in God, and slippery for my excess trauma stored in my lower chakras. What's your diagnosis of your pulse?
I would say it is inconsistent and not like it's arithmetic,
Ooh,
right?
irregular.
Yeah, it's an irregular pulse right now. Could be some blood stagnation. There's gonna be because I'm literally releasing some things with my dad. There's a lot of subconscious things that I didn't realize.
Choppiness. I noticed
Choppy,
some choppiness in my pulse. I
yes,
feel
choppy
choppiness.
and irregular, I would say.
Hectic. That actually sounds worse than mine.
Well, for you, you've been dealing with this in a very consistent basis for a while now. That's why I can understand the deficiency. For me, it was
That's also
like
true.
really sudden. So
Shock all of a
like,
sudden.
yeah. So like my heart and lungs, and we can talk about this deeper. Kind of like skipped a beat, and we're like, whoa, what just happened? So there's this irregular beat that we're trying to find our regularity again when someone as big as my father kind of leaving my space, and now for me to having to step up, it feels very irregular for me.
Well, that can take us into the next segment of Codes of Destiny. This period for you between the Scorpio full moon and this black moon, I think was like the equivalent for you. I know you're dealing with 8th house, but I think that's the equivalent of like 12th house, like gestation energy. And this new moon is really where you can start, you've processed at least like some of it, and you can start attempting to, as you said, step into those roles after this new moon, is what I would
Exactly.
say.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I think, like we're talking about also the codes of destiny going on right now with the collective energy, we're having a lot of conjunctions, we're having a lot of signs changing elements. And so I feel like even collectively, there's a lot of astrological timings that are changing, again, to kind of show us that like we're prepared for an upgrade first, personally to connect to the divine more deeply, but then collectively to also connect deeply to our way of connecting to the divine as a group, right? And I think this is where we're seeing religious conversations being very heated today, because as a collective, we're trying to connect to the divine spark that is, as again, like we were saying, releasing a lot of our ancestral patterns, right? So for me, I'm releasing ancestral patterns just as you are, but collectively, how are we also releasing ancestral patterns that no longer works? And so I think the cosmic update is also very interesting right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, like you said, there's so many planets changing signs, but for me, the key here is this upcoming black moon on the 25th of June that's happening at, if I believe, 4 degrees Cancer. And at the time of that full moon,
New
there's
moon.
also, I mean, the new moon, thank you. There's also Sun is conjunct Jupiter in Cancer. So I hope you're all
Yeah.
in for this emotional ride. Emotional? Did anybody say emotional? Anybody? Anybody?
You all know this is literally where the whole howling at the moon and becoming a werewolf comes from, right? This full moon.
Well, that comes from full moon.
Yes.
The howling is a full moon.
Yes, yes, but again, like this whole new moon energy is always kind of where we're getting this emotional outburst from a full moon, but the new moon is where like that howl starts, right? Because it is a transition of the new moon saying, hey, something changed. And by the full moon, we're expressing that full on. But right now, we're talking about new thoughts, new ideas, because we're having Jupiter now expanding the Cancer, the emotional side, and then we do have also Mercury there too, and that's why you're saying this like dark Gemini, because the moon is hidden and she's like whispering to us, but by the time we feel that full moon, it'll be full on, right? So I feel like the beginning of that moon sharing with us almost the dark thoughts and ideas that we've kind of kept suppressed. And I feel like right now I do feel with Jupiter in Cancer, it's almost like, what emotion have you been repressing? And that's that dark hidden energy that's kind of not rising, is just like whispering in our ears and telling us, hey, there's more things to look for. And we won't see it with our eyes. We can only feel it with our hearts.
No, for sure, for sure. I mean, certainly though, from the 24th to the 26th of June, I would say it's not a good time to start anything new, to make any important decisions. With this moon, it's really best that those 3 days are spent in rest and meditation. This will bring the best out of this moon.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel it goes back to like this idea of like going back to dark Gemini. I think Gemini always tells us that we have to think about things, logic, everything's in the mind. But with this dark Gemini is saying, hey, stop with the mind chatter, right? And we talk about this in meditation, being aware of that mind chatter so we can kind of like calm it down and allow that emotion to rise and let that emotion rise and express itself without having to use logic to explain what we're feeling, right? Because I think too often, even collective, we tend to focus on like, what is your brain thinking, what are we thinking, how are we judging things, how are we criticizing things. But sometimes actually emotions need to come through and just let me be angry, because after this anger am I able to process things. But if we're trying to process and logicalize, justify the emotions we're having, we're actually not fully allowing the emotions to come out and release. And that's why it's very important now, with this dark Gemini, for us to not put so much effort or weight into the thoughts that we're having.
I mean, I would say it's going to be the full Cancer season is going to be pretty much emotional. This new moon kind of kicks off the vibes, shall we say.
Yeah.
But I do think, in sidereal astrology, you've got Venus going into sidereal Taurus the 30th of June. So that's positive. I mean, everybody should be experiencing, generally have a better experience after that, at least. But for me, the Saturn Neptune conjunction is the star of the show, shall we say. That is really, so much is happening with that Saturn and Neptune conjunction right now.
Yeah, I definitely have to talk about that one just because I think we've been experiencing that Saturn and Neptune in Pisces together. They never conjuncted, and so they conjunct. So, what's really important too is those two signs have been running the zodiac wheel for quite a while, right? And so now when they end Pisces and go into Aries, it's kind of like a new zodiac sign, a new zodiac cycle is starting. And so, because of that, I feel like we kind of ended a daydream with spirituality, with spiritual circles, with spiritual cults, with spiritual groups. Everybody being like, oh, I'm so spiritual because I can meditate, I can hear God's voice, I'm like channeling more. And then now with the conjunction in Aries, it's kind of like saying, have you been in delusion and illusions for the last couple of years? Are people using spiritual concepts to explain their ego, right? And I think this is like, the Neptune Saturn conjunct in Aries is like saying, what is your personal spiritual connection, not the collective? And this is where like we run into a lot of people in cults, right? Or starting groups of like, oh, if you guys join my my dark Gemini cult, you guys will understand more about how spiritual you are more than other people. And this is really funny that it makes sense that during the Aries change that we're going to see more of that ego coming out of spirituality, and we're going to recognize those kind of cult leader type energy that are using spiritual concepts, right? The voice of God, the martyrdom, to kind of like tell their ego lies. So I think that right now we're really going to experience this. And also, you guys know Saturn represents karma. So I think, Neptune and the karmic line of really what have we done spiritually and what doesn't work is going to show up. And so, I'm excited for this energy because we are all going to be more aware of where our spiritual connection is. And it's not going to be going to big circles and having big groups meditating and chanting together, but actually being at home. And can you be spiritually connected while not doing the typical spiritual stuff like meditation, and that? But can I be eating and have a spiritual connection, right? Rather than like going to meditation, going to spiritual groups to connect. I feel like we're being taught that spirituality is always with us.
I mean, you've got a very interesting take on that. Because you've obviously taken into account the fact that the conjunction is in Aries, but how I saw it, which is a little bit of a different angle, is Neptune is basically dissolving those egoic attachments, the fears, the illusions, and all these rigid structures, Saturn, that we have in order for to advance spiritual evolution, your own spiritual evolution. So it's interesting that you say that. I've got a different thing, but just slightly different angle. I like your interpretation.
Yeah, I feel like it's like the same side of the coin, right? Or the two sides of the
Yeah,
same coin, which is you need one to get to that next pace, right? So, yeah.
exactly. Neptune is clearing the way for Saturn, who will bring structure in so that these energies can be integrated. I mean, that's exactly it.
Yeah, yeah. And so for me, it happened in the eighth house. So that's why this huge transition. And even for me, when I knew the transitions were coming, but I hadn't really dealt with heavy eighth house energies. Like, really, the last time I had any family member pass was, I mean, almost like 20 years ago when my grandma passed away, right? So I haven't had any grandpa, grandma alive. So I've only had my parents. And my dad was 87 when he passed, so he was not young. He was old. He had lived a full life, and so he's like passing on that torch to me, and for me to kind of then step up and say, hey, because my father is now head back to the spirit world, I was now having a deeper relationship with spirit. So my dad used to wake up every morning at like 5:30 in the morning to pray, and then around like 6 at night he would pray again. So we prayed twice a day, and I would wake up every day, and I could tell he was praying because the lights were on. I would go and do my morning ritual, but like he was heavily praying. And since he passed, I would wake up every morning and not have that prayer. And so what I felt like is I went and started to pray for him and meditate for him, but also really kind of go on into his altar and started to do what he was doing. Right. And so again, it's like he was passing on that torch to me. So for me, I was kind of dissolving my own ego, saying, oh, I don't, Dad, I don't need to like pray like you do. Yet, like his consistency as a Taurus made me want to kind of go, hey, I really like that he woke up and the first thing he did was pray. Right. And so I was like, okay, maybe I can dissolve my ego a little bit and kind of go, let me go talk to God. Let me go talk to my ancestors and my spirit family before I start my day. And that has been very drastic for me because I grew up doing that. And, as kids, we hate everything our parents want us to do. So I used to pray all the time. And obviously, because out of duty, my parents, made us do it. But recently, because my dad passed, I just felt inclined to want to kind of, I wasn't praying exactly like my dad was. I was kind of like doing my own meditations and prayers to the ancestors and all that. But that made me feel more connected to him and vice versa to the greater source. But I had to dissolve my ego in being frustrated at what I felt when I was growing up and praying all day long. Because as a kid, you still want to play, right? You want to wake up, you want to go play. But like my mom used to make us go pray every morning. And so now it's been interesting for me to see that my spirituality is still intact, but my father, that transition is what helped me understand my deeper connection to God.
Yeah, that's profound, really. It's amazing how it just completely aligns with what's happening in the skies. As above, so below.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And so that transition to eighth house, again, it's such an important conversation because we're having this deeper, darker conversation right today about just the darker stuff of death. But I felt like when my dad left and went up, a lot of people kind of say, I feel sad because I've lost my father, and actually say, no, actually my father came in to give me life, and he spent the 87 years to give me whatever he could to me. So now that he's gone, he's only given me stuff, and now he's gone back to spirit. He's now part of God. So in a way, by talking to my father, I'm talking to God again, right? And that like gives me this deeper insight that like when people transition back to spirit, it's not a loss, but rather it's a gain back to connecting to spirit, because my father no longer has an ego body, but his essence is always with me and can never be lost, because everything I've experienced with him is with me now, and no one can take that away. Even if you took his body away, a lot of my sisters would joke around and say, oh yeah, dad's telling me to do that, dad's telling me to do that, and all of us are like, but dad's not here. I'm like, I know, I just feel like dad's talking to me. So it feels like in a way our father's voice is now have kind of reunited to God's voice. And it's really interesting, but my oldest cat, right when my father passed, would go to his bed and just like not at the top of the bed, but at the foot of the bed, and would stare at the head of the bed. And he only did it for 2 weeks. He hasn't been sleeping there since then. But for the first 2 weeks, I'd be like, "Where's my cat?" And then he would be sleeping at on my dad's bed every morning, and he would stay there for hours. And now he doesn't even go into the room anymore. So in that transition, I really felt like cats, animals really understand that transition, and was kind of like reminding me that like just because you don't understand what happened doesn't mean that the cats and the animals and the spirit itself doesn't understand. It knows intrinsically that, a soul went back into the spirit world. And, and that was really beautiful for me to experience because, I live in my dad's house, and a lot of people don't realize like it's tough to kind of like if your parents lived in another house, and you have like pictures and objects that remind you of him. I live in the house where like he died in, right? And so everything that I walk around in my house reminds me of him. And so I've had to really face that transition much more bluntly. Like it wasn't subtle. It was very in my face. Every morning I wake up, I would recognize and realize that my father was no longer there. And so in a way, by taking on his practice, I also work on his yard every morning. And it's hard to say my yard, right? It's because it's still kind of to me his yard, but I've taken a lot of his responsibility, and that to me, I've always loved gardening. I've always loved connecting to the earth, and again, like my father kind of like shown me, here's another way you can connect to spirit. And I do connect to the mother spirit a lot more when I work on the land compared to like when I pray, I connect to the father spirit a lot more, right? And so my father was able to give me both of the spiritual connections as he transitioned. So to me, I didn't lose anything. I felt like I gained something more divine in his transition.
Yeah, that's a beautiful manifestation of Saturn and Neptune.
Yeah, yeah.
But so let's transition into keeping it real and carry on that conversation.
Yeah, let's do it. So we're in the real talk section, y'all. We're gonna go deeper into this conversation.
I mean, I can't speak to your experience. You've been having eighth house ish.
But we did talk about this with your own father and how he was at one point, you had some transition in the eighth house and you did kind of come in to make sure he didn't transition. I remember that too. And so I experienced something similar in that transition, but for me, it was his passing. So I thought that was really beautiful that I got to experience kind of you making sure he didn't, you know, go on
Yeah,
during.
yeah. My dad's alignment is Pluto traveling through the eighth house. So, but that was, I mean, that was at the time, that was also one of my tests. God was testing me. In the Bible back in the day, this is going a little bit off topic, but in the Bible, so a lot of people believe astrology is evil, it's darkness, it's not from God. And I started having that conversation with God, and it came to my attention that astrology, there's a way to use it. And the key around how to use astrology is it must never be your authority above God. This is basically the downfall of astrology, because people were starting to refer to astrology and ignoring what God was saying. And so with my dad, what had happened was God had actually told me that something was going to happen to my dad, and he said everything in the physical world will tell me that my dad's not going to make it, but he is telling me, and if I do what he says, that my dad will make it just fine. And so I was looking at my dad's astrology, and I was like, this is not looking good, he's not going to make it. And then I remembered what God said to me. And it was really him testing me. Can I take his message above what astrology is telling me? And luckily I passed with flying colors. But the key message there is really, I was just pretty much being tested, or one of the things I was being tested on is really God's voice and message being my number one priority above all else.
Yeah, and that's a
Which,
very
I mean,
deep.
it's pretty much Neptune, Saturn vibes as well in Aries, I would say.
Yeah. And again, going back to like how you were saying that important message is like anything in the physical is again the simulation and the illusion and Maya, and that we can get tricked. This is why like this conjunction in Neptune, Aries, Saturn is like saying don't get tricked. in the physical ego, because we can get lost in the fact that like our divine connection to God is much more potent and more powerful and unique to us. And we are having this deeper conversation with the divine all the time. And so if we look at astrology and also don't understand fully how astrology works, because I don't believe astrology makes things happen, is just telling us there's a timing for things, and during those timing is when the energies are able to really kind of move energies around. And so for me it's I've learned that also if I get stuck in reading too much of the astrology, I will create the expectation and want things to happen a certain way, versus I like to do the astrology post-mortem. It's probably not a good word today, but uh, post things, because then I'm able to reflect back what the astrology was teaching me, rather than like being so stuck in the astrology and then like almost, because I've seen these people do this too. I'm like, oh, I have to do this because the astrology tells me to. No, the astrology never tells you to do anything. Actually, the astrology teaches you there's something going on here. Now connect deeper to see what is going to happen or whatever you need to be prepared for. Like for me, if I had gone into the astrology, I would have been too busy trying to like save my dad. Versus for me, it was more like pay. I was in the everyday experience, and my dad was telling me he was ready to go. He even said a week before he passed, he's like, Charlie, I'm done with the yard. This is your yard now. Like whatever you want to do, do it. I don't have the energy to continue doing it. I'm done with this. Like, it's no longer my season. And that was really like jarring at first. I was like, whoa, dad, like that's so much responsibility, but okay, like I'm willing to start taking that on. And he would say little things like that. And if I was trying to really save him, and it's really tough because here I am, a doctor of acupuncture, and I've been needling him, not as consistently, but again, like he was an older man, so I can't just turn him into 30 years old. I mean, that's not what acupuncture does, right? And so even to the last day, he was having a hard time breathing, and I was doing some acupuncture on him, and it's easy to kind of go, oh my God, I killed my dad. I did not save him because I'm a doctor of acupuncture. I should have saved him. No, literally, when he showed up to the hospital, they were like, all his organs stopped working. Like, for some reason, it was like, okay, like it's almost like the heart ran out, and it's like, I'm done, I'm out. And so no amount of needles could have saved, and not even saved. He was ready to leave. He told my sister, he told all his family, little things that made us sound like, what is going on with dad? Do you feel like dad's a little weird? And then when that happened, we all, we were struggling at first because we were like, hey, because we're all fighters, right? And we're all healers, right? My sister dentist, pharmacist, we all know the medical field. And in the hospital, when they basically hooked him up to all the machines, they told us, look, actually, without the machines, he can no longer stay alive. So do you guys want to do operation to save him, or what would you guys like to do? And so all of us kind of band together and realized, this is what dad told me. This is what dad told me. And then suddenly you could see there was a pattern. We're like, did dad tell us he was leaving? As if like in preparation that he knew that he was getting ready to go, but almost like he's been, and all the doctors, and even we had family doctors who were looking at his stuff. They're like, how's he not dead yet? He should have been dead like a few years ago. And so we felt like he's been holding on for a long time to see us well. I think for me, he's been seeing me kind of like, I've been working, kind of looking for, clients and patients, as I'm also kind of finishing my board. But he felt like, okay, I was good, and he didn't need to take care of me because he saw me kind of taking care of myself. So he realized too that like, okay, I guess none of my kids need me. So maybe it's time for them to let them know how proud and how happy I am for them. So by the time we all, and it took us probably like 30 minutes, but we were like, I think dad wants us to let him go. So we told my sister told the hospital, and the hospital was almost trying to get us to do a whole nother week of hospice post surgery to see if we can save him. And we're like, stop. He does not want to go through this, because we're going to end up paying all this money for surgery, which he's just going to die, because his body's like, no, I don't want this anymore. And so we decided to, like, unplug him the following day. So we all gathered. We called my mom. She flew in like ASAP. That morning we basically all gathered around him. It was really funny too, because in the hospital there's a 2 visitors limit, and they all knew that we were going to unplug my father that morning. So you could see them kind of like we had like at one point like 6, 7, 8 of us crowded around my dad, and they kind of like gonna tell us, hey, there's only 2 people, but we all looked at them like, we're gonna unplug him right now, leave us alone. So they allowed us to kind of deal with that process of seeing him kind of basically flatlining. And then and what was great is we had the opportunity to pray the entire time while he was there. And just wanted to share some stuff with you guys that when he was in the hospital and he was in a coma, because we kind of had to sedate him, he was energetically around us. He wasn't in his body. My nephew, my niece, a couple of us saw him not in his body. And then at one point, my nephew's like, I think his older brother is here. He in like my nephew hadn't seen him in a while because he's much older, but he had seen him in a younger version, as if his spirit had come back to pick up my dad. And my dad loves his older brother, so like I know that if his older brother came, my dad would have totally left with him instead of like stuck around with us. And so for us, it was this deeper ritual that what we do, where we actually let go a loved one, is we kind of will pray, and then we tell him to go to my mom said golden light. A lot of us say go to the golden light, go to the light, do not go to the red light, do not get tricked into coming back here. We were not allowed to say we miss him, we want him back, but we had to kind of say, please dad, go. You're going to be taken care of. We'll take care of everything here. You no longer need to like stick around. And that was very difficult for us, because we knew that like we had to stay strong to make sure that he wouldn't feel the karma to want to like stick around and help us in ghost form, right? And we know this as like hungry ghost. We know this is kind of like had this discarnate. But that was really important for us to kind of go through that practice or that ritual with my mom, with kind of we didn't have a monk at the transition, but we had a monk during the cremation. And so that was kind of very deep for us to kind of see my father pass. And yeah, and to me that was again this deeper connection that like we were still sad to have him leave, but we also realized that like for him spiritually he needed to go at this right time, right? Because he already lived his life, and we would have been selfish if we wanted him to stick around, right? So we also had to really quickly kind of like get to that position where we're like, it's okay, just go, and as we were like crying, please dad, just go, and it was kind of this bittersweet, because we had to kind of project that we didn't want him to come back, which was really beautiful. And kind of not everybody gets to experience seeing a parent or even a loved one go, right? As much as we didn't get to say goodbye to him one-on-one, we got to say goodbye while he was in coma. So we got to also release our needs for him so that he didn't feel like, he was attached to this world again. And that was very beautiful for us to experience as a family. And that's why like this transition has not been very difficult for me, just because we did a lot of goodbyes and we were prepped for it. Versus I cannot see how tough it would be if like people weren't ready for it, right? So that's why I'm saying astrology is great, because now looking back, it's so accurate. But if I had gone and said, oh, my dad is going through this transition and I'm supposed to save him, it would have been my ego speaking. It would have been me saying astrology tells me to do that. And again, it's sometimes astrology is not there to tell us to do anything. It's just a reflection of what is happening, but it is really our spiritual and soul that's trying to make sense of our journey. And it's really, I feel like, the ego that tries to like force astrology to be what our ego wants us to be. So, I love how like you get to share that astrology is not the end all be all, but really our connection to God is important.
Yeah, it's very special, Charlie. And I was actually thinking about it while you were going through that. I was like, your role in helping him transition is quite significant on your healing path. And what more beautiful human being to help transition than to make sure your dad transitions safely.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's pretty special.
yeah. Thank you.
Um, eighth house, so that's eighth house energy. The 12th house energy, on the other hand, that I was facing, um, it's layered, but if I can focus on some aspects that I would think would benefit us at this point in time around the Saturn Neptune conjunction, I feel like there's been, especially for me, but for many of us at least that have been called to serve God, Neptune, we've been dealing with this tension also around struggling with the material, Saturn. And it's almost like, that whole thing about the manifestation where you've got to detach from the outcome.
Yeah,
This struggling with this material side when we call to serve is really like what I would say is the shadow side of the detachment from that outcome, which is where, when you call to serve, people completely ignore the concepts of housing, money, even dignity, which is really spiritual bypassing. That is spiritual bypassing. And why is it spiritual bypassing? Because what you're in essence doing, that ignoring the money, ignoring the housing and all of that, you're basically sacrificing your own well-being to serve others. This is classic martyrdom syndrome. Classic. But we had previously spoken about, people wanting to or thinking that they need to work for free. So I wanted to just touch on that again with the Saturn Neptune conjunction. I feel like it's coming up and that people will be able to benefit from that. So if you think about this martyrdom syndrome, those that have of us that have been called to serve, and so therefore it's almost like there's an underlying belief of having to suffer to like for spiritual growth. And the point is, it's not that difficult to believe. I mean, if I just look at my own experience, first of all, we studied yin yang energy. Now, yin yang energy is the balance of life. This is how it is. You have to have yin and yang. You can't only have yang. Okay? So if I have to go back to, right after my brother passed, this was the first time that God had introduced me to the concepts of yin yang. When I was confronting him and I said, but why did this have to happen? Why do I have to go through this? Why are you doing this to me? And he didn't mention the words yin yang, obviously, because I'd never heard of it. But the answer that he gave me was, I have to take you into the depths of darkness in order for you to really experience and appreciate its equal and opposite later on. If I don't take you there now, you're not even going to notice this equal and opposite later on. And that was basically the introduction to yin yang energy. And I think a lot of people think like that, right? That there's this, and even if you think about like what God told me, which is, it almost seems like that's where my belief comes from, is that like God's like, you have to suffer in order to, get what's coming. And that's actually not really what he was saying. But really what actually is happening is nobody's had a spiritual awakening from winning the lottery. Okay. You have a
really.
spiritual awakening. You have a spiritual awakening because you have suffered some loss, some grief. I mean, there's been a suffering, and all these little concepts that really build into this belief where that suffering needs to come first. It's really, that suffering is really a catalyst for transformation, though. It's not a requirement for the transformation. So this is where we need to start, really fixing our perspective on what's actually going on here. Why is the suffering happening and where it's leading exactly?
Yeah. It is such a deep conversation, and when we were talking about these spiritual communities, because I think there's a lot of trauma bonding where people will trauma bond and actually not heal from the trauma, right? And so it's really funny because a lot of people came into these spiritual circles because they were traumatized and they found that like something wasn't there, right? Like for me, I've like hit rock bottom. It's like this is not what I thought spirituality is, and so in a way, I actually made myself leave everything so that I could focus, right? But sometimes like the astrology or the timing or God, or maybe you made a previous arrangement with God, say, God, make sure you take everything away from me so I can pay attention to this lesson, right? And a lot of times when I look at people's charts, you could see that there's a transition going where it's going to trigger someone to go through hardships, the suffering, what we call it, so that they could actually grow like from like a lotus growing from the mud out of the mud into the light. And I think this is this deeper conversation where in spiritual circles, after the trauma bond, suddenly everyone's like, we're love and light. We don't do dark. We don't touch darkness. We just send light to the darkness. And we're like, can we talk about this? Because all of us were traumatized to awakening. Yet ironically now we don't want any of the trauma is and then people then trauma bond as if like that trauma is gone, right? And what's really funny is that we're actually not healing from our trauma, but we're actually finding misery loves company, the attraction, laws of attraction from misery, rather than actually finding guides that teaches you that that misery is only a temporary emotion to trigger your spirit to realize that you are beyond that emotional trauma because and most of us get lost in the trauma because we believe it is sometimes physical emotional in this sense this reality, but it doesn't go beyond like this lifetime. And this is kind of that deeper awakening where like we all have to get triggered into change, right? And in this kind of triggering into change is when we're really going to realize our light. It's like saying you don't see any stars in the sun in the daytime. You only see the bright lights of the stars in the darkness of night, right? That means that our light can only be shown when we are in our darkness. And this is why we're going to talk about the yin yang. The yin yang talks about the fact that without that darkness, there is no light. So when people say love and light without darkness, there is no light. And that's the trick because then in that there is only light and love, but there's no darkness, then that darkness is what then triggers people to trauma bond, create cults around that trauma, and that's where people then go into this martyrdom, right? I've experienced this a lot. I'm a Virgo stellium, y'all, so I've done plenty of let me help somebody out because when I help somebody out, I have a dopamine hit and I believe I'm happy. Yet no one will help me, no one will take care of me. I will not take care of myself because I believe that taking care of everybody else is better, right? And so as healers, and even today as modern good people, like people get caught up in like, oh, I need to help this person because if I help them, I'm helping the greater cause, right? Have you walked around in LA? Every other person needs help. And so, like, if you are so busy taking care of everybody, you're actually missing the opportunity to realize that, like, you have to heal that trauma within you, not by helping somebody else, right? And then it goes back to also, like, the not getting paid for the work because you're like, oh, God made me do this, so I'm taking care of it. And then you end up having everyone who has these gifts from God become poor, can barely afford anything, and then they don't do their work. And that's the trap. Because if you're not financially stable, first chakra, if you don't feel safe in your home, first chakra, then how are you going to actually have the energy to hold someone's trauma and not feel tricked into trauma bonding with them, you know? And this is where actually compassion teaches us, don't sympathize with someone. You have to send them compassion for where they're at, but you do not have to take that pain away from them. That's their job. You know, and this is where we get caught up as healers. We're like, oh, I'll make you feel better. No, no. As a healer, I cannot do that. I can only guide you and reflect what it feels like to be healed from trauma, but I cannot tell you or give you the magic pill or the magic needle work to actually heal you from your trauma. What we're doing, even when we're doing acupuncture, we're releasing the anxiety and the stress so that you can start processing the trauma in a very stable state. But we never tell you don't process your trauma. You have to process that trauma so that you can go past that, right? And that's what's so beautiful about what you're saying is like we all got caught. We can easily get caught in martyrdom, but this like transition or conjunction in in Saturn and Neptune is teaching us stop trauma bonding, stop running away from the pain, and actually own that we are the only one that can transmute that pain into the love because we know the pain, right? And so like when we see pain in others, I don't take that away from them, because if you take that away from them, they're not awakening, right? And that's this deeper conversation where we should be there lovingly for people who are going through the trauma, but only holding space rather than taking their trauma from them. You know, and that's why I think it's really beautiful that Saturn will call you out, say, stop taking the trauma away from people.
Well, I mean, it's funny that you say that, but what I wanted to say is, for me, the experience of this martyrdom syndrome is really, I've started seeing it as actually a cause for my trust issues with the divine, because you're basically, you touched on the poverty consciousness essentially, because it sends you down that road, and then you have this lack of trust in divine abundance and the fact that God will provide. So this is a blockage in the first chakra right there.
Yeah, it reminds me of that really funny saying where like um some guys like the house is flooding, he's on top of the roof, and he prays to God, can you help me, can you save me, right? And God keeps sending people to save him, right? And he's like, no, 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 God's gonna save me, watch. And then when he dies and crosses over, God, why didn't you save me? I sent you this guy, this person, this thing. I give you money, I give you this. And what did you do? You still waited for some miracle that doesn't exist because you were too busy in the hoping something will get fixed your way rather than recognizing that you have to take action yourself to find a place where you feel safe, because that interaction, because everybody around us is also the experience that God is talking to us, right, through other people too. So it's just a beautiful kind of I love hearing that one, because we get a lot of people get caught up in the praying too much and not taking action behind their prayers.
Well, I mean, that's Saturn and Neptune right there. Neptune is grounding your spiritual ideals through disciplined self-care, Saturn.
Yes.
So this is what it boils down to. I mean, this martyrdom situation, it's certainly not the answer based on, even a lot of what you've said still gives that perception that suffering is required. Because, we've just said yin and yang, suffering is part of the parcel. But the point is, continuing to cling to that martyrdom belief is taking you backwards in your spiritual journey. It's not taking you forwards. It depletes your yin energy. It imbalances, and so imbalances the yin and yang. It's not going to work long time. So really, what we need to be doing is changing our perspective, and not so much seeing suffering or these things that are happening to us as punishment, but rather as, I would say, lessons that need to be learned. These are, the yin lessons to achieve the yang joy. So, the life of a yogi, they say something about the life of a yogi does not know positive and negative experiences. Just everything is. And so this, I think, really kind of embodies that concept nicely, where we can get away from this whole thing about the fact that suffering is required on the path, rather than seeing suffering as part of the lessons on the path, so that we can, grow further spiritually and not be held back by these mentalities. I mean, really, it's about understanding that that divine abundance. It's a flow of energy, and you are a conduit of the flow. So it's all, you're part of the whole. It cannot be separated. So I really just think it's about seeing suffering as part of the lessons, not a flaw that needs to be fixed, but just to move through it, to feel it, to learn the lessons. And it's really going to help you with whatever God has planned down the line for you. No lesson is taught to you for no reason.
Yeah,
This is
it's really, it's funny. It's kind of like, have you heard of like, in many groups, people like to say, Earth is a prison planet. And some people say, Earth is a school. Earth is this, Earth is that. And it's so funny because you could see where people are in their journey based on what they describe Earth to be, right? And it's going back to like, I feel like Earth is just here to trigger you. The rest of what happens is actually your perception of what you think that trigger is, right? But this is why I feel like a lot of us are asked to come here, or we choose to come here because we want the triggering to happen, because in that triggering do we actually evolve a lot more, right? And you can even see, like, depending on what age you are, if you were to look back at 10 years from now, maybe 20 years from now, even 30 years from now, can you imagine who you were in those time span? And the amount of time you change during this time span shows us how much we've grown. And that growth came from the fact that we were triggered into these growth, right? Rather than like, life would be good every 20 years we get triggered, then yeah, you're most likely not going to go through so much um, spiritual connection and healing or experiences if you're not getting triggered into changing something in your life for this kind of deeper lesson that needs to happen. So I appreciate how you said that, like, don't get stuck in the trigger, but let the trigger happen, and then start experiencing the post triggering. Just because some people will get stuck on just that trigger, and some people will say, I never want to get triggered that way, and will do everything in their path to never experience that trigger. And that's why people say, oh, astrology, that's demonic. Don't ever get triggered by that shit. That's because there's people who probably looked at it, got triggered, and go, oh my God, astrology is so bad because the eighth house astrology told me people are going to die. And because the eighth house happened, I got, my dad died, and now astrology did that to me. What? But that's where people are getting stuck with thinking that when things happen, it's to hurt them rather than it's a trigger for them to start seeing a different perspective of their life, or being more expansive of what is happening to them.
no, 100%. So should we move across into the sacred medicine segment so that we can start addressing how we can treat these symptoms of lack of trust in the divine, martyrdom?
Yeah.
I think these topics are also pervasive because you've got Uranus in the eighth house, sextiling these energies. Uranus in the eighth house, Uranus in Taurus, sextiling these energies of Saturn and Neptune. So that's why I really feel like the martyrdom is an issue right now. And even with what you've been going through, your dad was taking care of everything, the house and all of that, and you haven't been earning money because you've been studying and so forth. So I feel like poverty consciousness is also something you've had to work through, like the fact that you can now provide for yourself and provide for the family based on this, uh, new life's purpose that you've developed over the last few years.
Yeah, yeah. I think the poverty consciousness is such a big issue that we don't realize a lot of us carry. And I think that sacred medicine that I had to learn for that as well is um, I had internal monologues that told me I wasn't good enough for something. And it's exactly what happened when I basically became and graduated with my doctorate in acupuncture. It was kind of like this. I had this imposter syndrome, right? Because before acupuncture, y'all, I was an engineer. I made games. I made video games. I made VR experiences. I was all into the tech space. And so having to go into being a healer, and at that point, at that time, I was watching all these healers in spiritual circles kind of go through their own martyrdom. And I was like, no, I don't want to be a poor healer like them, right? And so even then, I was like telling myself, I don't want to be a poor healer. So when I graduated, I was like, oh man, am I going to be a poor healer like them? And then I realized, why do I keep thinking that I'm poor? Right? Like, why am I even using that word poor in the fact that I'm a healer? And so, one of the things that I had to do that was very deep is, and because I'm a Virgo, repetitive actions and routines are my trick into breaking out of my own patterns, right? So, so as a Virgo, I already studied and know that it takes 21 days for patterns to change. So as long as you do it ritualistically every day, you're going to get through those patterns. And so for me, in getting through that poverty consciousness, is I told myself that I never recorded it myself. So I was repeating these words internally to myself that say, I am abundant. All the patients are looking for me and looking for doctors like me find me, and the patients I'm looking for are there for me. I'm abundant in being able to find the clients. And so I wasn't saying I'm trying to be rich, but rather saying I'm fulfilling my role as a healer and the right patients come to me. And that I knew was going to provide me the stability and the income that I needed. But even then, like I had to also teach myself and I get paid the right value for my services. Because so many times, look, where I'm a Vietnamese Asian immigrant, we literally dealt with this where the Vietnamese community who only speak Vietnamese and don't speak English, and they ask me how much is your acupuncture treatment. I'm like, it's $80, and they're like, what? In Vietnam, it's like $10, and they just put these needles, right? Like with no guide tubes. I'm like, yes, but that's in Vietnam. That's that medicine, and so it's understanding that like we have a different way, and not just that, but like that's the Vietnamese community. They don't necessarily follow a lot of the American traditions and cultures, and even then for me I had to learn what that meant. But like being able to be licensed to have a clinic, and you're not to like avoid government, because a lot of people here who work underground, not underground, but like don't 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 report everything to the government. They do a lot of things kind of, on the DL, on the darkness realm, right? And so for me, I had to kind of realize, no, like don't judge myself and say lower my prices so that people don't judge that I'm a very expensive healer. But like, no, actually $80 is the average price. So I'm not even raising my price, but rather I'm just meeting the value. And I had to heal that side of me and I say, no, my value is that I studied this and now my patient can trust me when they come to me, and I don't have to be the acupuncture for everybody. I'm just here to be the acupuncture for the ones that are looking for me, right? And that changed just my dynamics of like, by going from like poor comedy consciousness that I'm not going to get patients to I'm going to be the best doctor so that I am the doctor for everybody. That's the extreme. I was going to go from poor to being like super rich that everybody needs me. And I realized that's also the opposite of poverty consciousness, is thinking you're going to be the richest person doing this medicine. I was like, no, I don't want to be super rich doing this medicine. This is my gift from the divine, and I'm doing this for the community. But if I don't have a home to continue doing this work, then I'm actually doing a disservice. And so for me, I practice every day reading and teaching my voice in my head to stop saying that I'm a poor healer, but rather I am the valued member of the healing community, that patients love coming to me and love what I'm doing, and I love working with them and supporting them in their healing journey, and that's it. And ever since that, truthfully, y'all, I haven't freaked out over not being able to pay for rent. I mean, and I'm not paying for rent, but paying for taking care of myself, for food, for having clothing, like just normal things. And since then, every day I just keep repeating, and I don't have to I don't have to say it. I recorded my voice saying it to myself, so I'm hearing my voice programming my subconscious to tell me that we're no longer in this poverty consciousness, but we are actually where we need to be, and we're just living our most divine, flowing, healer life.
Well, I mean, you pretty much gave the sacred medicine right there, because what you described, which is one of the ways you can overcome this martyrdom, is to set boundaries in your relationships. I've got a little intention mantra that I wrote down for us to share with everybody. So when you're setting boundaries in your relationships, you can pray with the intention that says, "I honor my energy as sacred, giving and receiving in balance." Another one is, "I trust the universe to provide as I embody my divine purpose." So these are some intentions and prayers that we can take with us into our sacred medicine to overcome the martyrdom.
And
And
I
then
would say
also,
make it your own. Make it your own too. It's very important that, because I've done many prayers, and when you pray other people's words, that prayer is not as potent as they come from your voice and your intentions. Because if you use words that you don't understand, then the energy actually doesn't get caught. It doesn't get triggered. So it's very important that like let's said, like,
I wouldn't say it doesn't work, but it's definitely, because I do mantras in ancient Sanskrit. I kind of know what it's about, but not the exact meaning, and it does help. But certainly, what you're saying is true. It's definitely stronger if you can strongly resonate with what you're saying. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. But also the other piece too is it has to be your voice. Your voice is the only thing that can subconsciously re-trigger. And you guys have to think about this. This is very important. This is how you don't get trapped into cults. This is how you don't get trapped into other people's mantras. Is read the mantra with your voice, because your voice should be reprogramming your subconscious. Nobody else's voice.
Yeah. And once you're able to reprogram your mind using these techniques, especially when dealing with concepts like martyrdom and poverty consciousness, by default, as you move through that, you will find that it will automatically restore your trust in the divine. I mean, that's what we were saying. That's almost it's almost the cause of your issues with your trust in the divine. So as you rectify that, you're able to trust in the divine more, and so you're clearing out those root and sacral chakra energies as well.
Yes, because you are a spark of the divine. That means that when you take action, the divine takes action with you. That's why they say God is walking next to you or in you. I really like that God is within us and living the experience with us. So it is important to like take action, because it is the divine taking action with you, not you waiting for divine action outside of you happening to you.
Exactly. Surrendering, because being able to trust in the divine also is surrender. Surrendering control to the divine does not mean not taking action. It means taking action and then detaching from the outcome. This is the surrendering to the divine. So this whole process, once you can move through the poverty consciousness and move through the martyrdom, you can start building up your trust in the divine again, and really, and it'll be easier to surrender. You know,
Exactly. Yes.
and
How about yourself? Do you have any medicine you'd like to share?
so as far as just off the top of my head with what we've been discussing, definitely Shenmen, which is calming the mind. We're
In
all
tongue. Yin Tang.
Sorry, Yin Tang. Shen Men's in the ear. Sorry, I was thinking of Shen. Yin Tang, Heart 7, which is the point.
On the ulnar side of things, on this side, right where the pinky is. Yeah.
Exactly.
Heart
Heart
7.
7, Heart 7, Shen Men right between the eyebrows.
Yin Tang, Yin Tang.
I mean, shit. Yin Tang. So acupressure, putting some pressure on there can help calm the mind as we go through these crazy times. And once you calm the mind, it's also going to be able. It would be also easier to surrender to the divine and start trusting the divine. We can go into more acupoints with regards to, I think, root and sacral chakras, how to help clear out the stored trauma, because that's going to be a lot of, if you look at my tongue, going to be a lot of dampness. We said slippery pulse, so spleen 6 as well, and liver 3, because a lot of the trauma is in the form of repressed emotions. So liver chi stagnation is also there, and of course stomach 36, which is just helping the digestive flow, and the processing, the transporting and transforming of nutrients and energy in the body. But we can go deeper into that next time. I think it's important just to get people thinking about these issues, give them some new perspectives on how they can think about it, the kinds of intentions they can go in with their prayers, put it in their own words, and we can go deeper, because I think these are big topics.
Yeah, it is. Yes. And I say, like, the last piece just to share with you guys is just gratitude. Just have gratitude for the darkness, gratitude for the trigger, gratitude in general. I think we get too caught up in criticizing things, criticizing or judging things right or wrong, good or
Saturn
bad.
and Neptune conjunct, criticizing your spiritual beliefs.
Yes, exactly. And I feel like right now it's a really good time to just be in gratitude for everything that happens, because you're still in control of your life and you are working with the divine. And as you're having a deeper connection with the divine, you are always being guided on how to, like, move as you're manifesting your needs, right? So it's very important for us to kind of stay in that presence of that. Again, the trust and surrender is because the divine is within us and it is listening to everything we're doing. And that is why paying attention to what you're saying in your thoughts and minds is creating the divine action that we take, right? And that's why it's very important that when we are in gratitude, we're not judging things good and bad, and we're able to see things more objectively, because it's very important to see things objectively, because sometimes the objective mind says, hey, we don't know the answer to yet, but it's okay, just keep going. Like, I didn't realize what was going to happen post my father passing away, but like all these things came up and crept up and I didn't think about it. But I'm being in gratitude of the experience, because if I get sad about it, which I'm okay getting sad about it. It's totally okay to be sad about this. I'm also then missing the good things that my father left and shared with me, rather than, oh, I'm so sad that my father will never do this with me. I'm like, no, but my father, like, did so much with me in the 87 years, and I don't need to suddenly, because he's gone now, that I am sad that he didn't do something with me. That's just focusing on the things that don't exist. But I do know that in 87 years he's been here, I have so much memory with him, and focusing on that and being in gratitude of that gives me a much more loving experience of that trigger. And that's where you can create that love and light, is being in the appreciation and gratitude of something will kind of allow you to stay in love and light, versus ignoring the trigger, ignoring the shadows and the darkness is not necessarily going to get you back into that love and light space.
Exactly, Charlie. Should we wrap it up with the temple door?
Yes. Let's close it out with the temple doors.
So I think a big takeaway here is really we spoke about suffering as part of the process, and how to get out of martyrdom and poverty consciousness and get your trust back in the divine, to clear out the lower chakras. But I think the key here is to really, let suffering trigger your awakening. But that doesn't mean your spiritual growth has to be in that same suffering. Let the suffering trigger the awakening, but then let your growth occur in joy, abundance, and the infinite divine flow of the universe.
Yes, beautiful. And for me, my last piece is just being gratitude of everything that happens, because you don't know how things are going to turn out. And so why not just enjoy that journey, because we are in that journey with God, and in that connection is kind of what, again, allows us to trust that God is there for us and God is there within us, so that we're also living our best life because we have this trust within us.
We were talking about Saturn and Neptune. The point is, all
Yes.
these things that we have to overcome around the Saturn and Neptune conjunction, it is exactly the Saturn and Neptune alignment that is helping you get through this stuff right now.
Yes, correct. Right. So in the triggering, the answer is also in that same alignment, because that
Exactly, in the
alignment is
same
only the
alignment.
trigger so that now you pay attention to the lesson.
Exactly.
Yes. So thank you, Lilith, for joining us. Thank you, everyone, for joining
Thank you,
us.
Dr. Charlier.
Yes. So until next time.
Until next time.
Please like this video, share it with your craziest friend and subscribe or follow for more of this madness.